Hello YouTube people, my name is Manuel Teuber. Hello YouTube people, my name is Manu, and oh, what a beautiful day here in Germany. It's so hot in here and I can't even move anymore. I want to start a challenge, a 30-day vlog challenge. With this challenge, I want to see primarily how far I can go and if I'm even capable of doing a daily vlog. And since it's always fun to do challenges together, I will challenge my best friend Eric. So Eric, if you watch this video, get prepared. Better give your best. So the challenge will start tomorrow. See you tomorrow, guys. Goodbye.
Right, 30 days, here we go. Right, since we do live in Singapore currently, I thought let's kick it off with a quick video about Singapore. So let's have a chat about 5 likes and 5 dislikes about Singapore. But first, let's get some coffee. Coffee, isn't that adorable? Perhaps for people who aren't familiar with Singapore at all, the most obvious one, the weather. For someone who has lived a significant amount of time in Europe, specifically the UK, it's difficult to stress how much of an upside living in Singapore is in terms of the weather. That actually brings me to my second like, quite smoothly, and that's the geographic location of Singapore. Because of where it is situated geographically, and because Changi Airport, Singapore's main airport, is such an international hub for airlines, it is so easy and comparatively cheap to just go to a lot of amazing places. On one of our first holidays here, when Easter came up, we didn't even notice. And then we were like, oh, it's Easter, so let's go somewhere. We booked something extremely last minute and we flew to Indonesia. Spent a very long weekend there and we got the flights for less than £100 each. I'm not going to go as far and say that Singapore's location is unique, but it certainly is special. And it just allows for some amazing travel if you actually live here. If you're coming here as a tourist, maybe not so much, but you could use it as a neat transit land. As someone who moved here from London, this one's big. Like most major capital cities around the world, London is dirty as fuck. Now, if you know anything about Singapore, chances are you know that Singapore is a fine city. Fine as in the government will fine you for any little infraction, and that does include littering. Now, Singapore isn't like super clean, it's not spotless. It's a big city, therefore there will be dirt, there will be trash, and so on. But because of the strong incentive the government provides, it's clean. As in, most people, when they finish their coffee cup, rather than in London where they just put it somewhere, just throw it on the street, people hold on to it for another 10-20 meters because it's not that fucking hard, and then throw it in the trash can. One of the best things about moving to a new city, a new country, a new culture every so often is that you get to meet loads of different kinds of people, different cultures. And Singapore, on the whole, the Singaporeans that I've met, they're lovely people. They're very friendly, they're very open. They're no Taiwanese. There are countries where I cannot categorically state that overwhelmingly I like the people. Singapore is not one of those countries. And now for what is probably my biggest like of Singapore. Oh my god, the food. Man, you have not experienced diversity in the choice of food until you've visited Singapore. You can walk quite literally into any hawker center and have a huge variety. You can eat your way all the way through Asia. I'm gonna leave it there for the food because the subject of food in Singapore deserves a whole nother video all on its own. So, on to the dislikes. Let's kick it up with the weather. Yes, it is very, very warm and sometimes hot in Singapore. However, because it is situated in Southeast Asia, this does mean that Singapore comes with a lot of rain. It rains a lot. The difference is that when it rains in London, it usually rains like all day and everything's miserable. When it rains in Singapore, it's different. When it rains in Singapore, very often it rains overnight. Secondly, it's an Armageddon style rain, about once a week. So the end of the world, 52 times a year, maybe more. But then everything just sort of goes back to normal an hour later. The first point about this is relating to the thing that I like about it, is that it's so close and you can travel everywhere. But it also means that you very quickly lose sight of how much all that traveling costs you. So you are going to need a lot of money if you're staying here for a longer period of time. But the other thing about its location is that Singapore is an island. There isn't anywhere to go, really. Yeah, you can cross the border into Johor Bahru in Malaysia. That's about it. Like, there's nowhere to go. And I've spoken to a lot of locals, and they actually, after a couple of years, they start feeling a little claustrophobic. Now this one I have to explain. Obviously it is very nice living in a city that is as clean as Singapore is. If you think about it a bit further, it does reveal a bit of a deeper truth, and that's the way that the Singaporean government runs things here. It is a little unnerving. For example, you have to cross the street where there is no traffic light, which means you will be jaywalking. Now a lot of locals jaywalk, but you can still get fined a lot of money just for crossing the road where there isn't an official crossing. If you spend some time thinking about it and noticing things here and there, it is a little too authoritarian for my personal taste. I've said in a previous video that Singapore is the only authoritarian state in the world that works. And that's true, I stand by that. Singapore does work. Nonetheless, it's not a great thing to have such an authoritarian state. Now, I know I've said I like the people in Singapore, but because Singapore has become such a hub for international business, what it also means is that it just attracts too many expats. There's too many white people here, for my taste. Now, you might call this pretentious, considering I am one of those expats. But when I go abroad, as in abroad for a Western person, I like to immerse myself with the local people. So I don't really tend to hang out with too many Europeans when I'm traveling in Asia. But secondly, as you know, Singapore is 70% ethnic Chinese. Now, when they came over here, obviously they brought a lot of their customs and behavioral mechanics with them. And what that means is you do see people spitting, you do see 80% of the population smoking, you see a lot of burping, just a lot of things that in Europe we would call rude or gross. That's totally normal in China, and thus here in Singapore as well. You're gonna get fat. With all this available food here that is so fucking delicious, it's really difficult to restrain yourself because a lot of the food is influenced by Chinese cuisine, obviously. It is very greasy, so unless you have a really fast metabolism, you're gonna gain some weight. Obviously, there's a lot more to Singapore than the 5 things I've mentioned. What I just really wanted to do is I wanted to sort of point out that the longer you live in a place, the more you start noticing its flaws. At the beginning, everything's hunky-dory, everything's cool, and then one by one you start noticing the flaws. Every place has this, no matter where. There's not a single country, not a single city, not a single culture on earth that is perfect. No matter where you go, you will have stuff that you dislike. There is no such thing as the greatest country in the world. There's no such thing as the greatest city in the world. Everything has its pros and cons. It's about finding the balance that is right for you. There's so many great things about Singapore and so many things to criticize. The list would literally be endless. And that's just from my perspective. Oh, and tomorrow's Singapore National Day. Stick around for that one.